This is episode 375 of Jumble Think.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Jumble Think, where we interview dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers all about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's show is Grammy Award winning Lecrae. Whether you're a new listener or a longtime fan, if you've never listened to Jumble Think, now's the time to do it. Head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and follow and subscribe to the show. To make it even easier, if you head on over to jumblethink.com, you'll find links to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, and more. So head on over and subscribe to the show. Now let's jump into today's conversation. Hey there, friends. Welcome to Jumble Think. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have a really cool conversation lined up for you today with Lecrae. Lecrae is recognized as the first artist to have an album debut at the number one position for both the Billboard 200 and the gospel charts at the same time. He's a rapper and activist, and in addition to earning accolades and multiple Grammy Awards for his musical talent, he has gained international respect for his socially conscious advocacy work, speaking directly to some of the most important conversations facing our nation and the world. He has a new book out called I Am Restored: How I Lost My Religion But Found My Faith. Going along with that, he also has a really fun documentary. It is called The Road to Restoration. I enjoyed this conversation with Lecrae, and I think you're going to enjoy it too. So let's jump into the conversation we had with Lecrae. Lecrae, thanks so much for joining us here on Jumble Think.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited about this. You have a new book out, I Am Restored: How I Lost My Religion But Found Faith. I have it right in front of me, or I've read it. It is a great book. I love the journey of faith as a believer myself. I love exploring these concepts because I think so often we feel isolated and alone in this journey, especially when we're dealing with some of the things that you dealt with. So I'm excited to be talking about that. Before we dive in, okay, I was reading the book and I came across these two terms that I had no idea what they meant. I come from very middle-class America, white background, and so you use these two terms, ring shouts and hush arbors. What in the world is that?
I'm trying to think of the context that I use those in. Essentially, what they are is like a hush arbor is kind of like this sense of, secluded, informal kind of space and place. And it really just speaks to me feeling out of place. It speaks to me trying to find my way and navigate a new world. Yeah. I think, sometimes when you're writing, you're looking to stretch your own vocabulary and find a new way to say something that you haven't said. And so I think that was a lot of it for me. Yeah. Is, in the ancient slavery times, a hush harbor was a place that slaves would gather in secret to just kind of practice their religious tradition. So it's like an intimate space.
Gotcha. Understand. You have, as part of this book, you've also released a documentary called The Road to Restoration. And there's 3 parts to it. I love in the first part, you talk about these dreams that you have. And Jumble Think, we're all about helping people figure out dreams. And we believe that dreams are birthed out of identity. And you're in this place of wrestling identity. But you mentioned these 3 dreams: the dream of being a rapper, the dream of being big and strong. You mentioned the dream of a family man and father, and the dream of a businessman, but that along the way, the dreams led to depression. So walk us through that journey of being this megastar who's won Grammys, who has a voice in so many different spaces of culture and civilization, especially in the church world. But even beyond that, you have a huge voice in the secular space. Going from a place where, from outside experiences, from outside perceptions, people would be looking at you going, you've arrived. How do you get to a place of all the dreams seem on paper like you're hitting one after another, and yet you find this place of depression and loneliness?
Yeah. A large part of that is the illusion that earthly success brings spiritual, emotional peace. And it doesn't, it just doesn't. It's a myth. And so, I think when you, like in anything, you're looking for a functional savior, and those functional saviors always let you down. So when it doesn't have the ability to really bring you peace, to really bring you joy, you find that, man, it's just a collection of trophies and plaques. It's metal and plastic and glass, and the applause of people. And so it's an interesting dynamic once you actually see it close up.
I'm curious though. You come from a faith background. You have a what appeared to be, at least from the outside, a very strong structural belief system. That was the core of your message when you're singing the songs that you're singing is, hey, look to Jesus. And how did you lose your way in that story when the songs you're singing, what appears to be like the foundation of your belief is that, and yet you somewhere that gets lost? How'd that happen?
Yeah, well, I came into the faith as a young man, and I was very zealous. And I think I was super idealistic. I thought that everybody was one big happy family. Everybody loved each other. I thought that everybody meant what they said when they said it. And so I was just kind of little by little, my idealism was chipped away. And you go on the road and you get behind the scenes. When you see how the sausage is made in Christendom, and you're like, oh no. And you become sad. And I became sad, and then I was cynical and I was jaded because I thought that these people were real and sincere. And then I just started questioning everything. And I think, there was a time period when I said, well, if nobody's serious, why am I so serious? If no one's taking this thing seriously, why am I? And I think that was the beginning of the spiraling of me kind of losing my way.
Yeah. You talk about the deconstruction of your faith and theology. And I know that in your college years, the years after that, you really went into this deep place of searching theology as a foundation. You have this experience. You talk about getting jaded and disillusioned by, they're saying one thing, they're acting a different way. Can I really trust the people around me? Can I really trust what they say? What they say doesn't seem to align with the theology and what I see in scripture. Did that cascade to not only impact your view of commercialized church, let's call it that, where it's, the mega church, the big business church? Did that trickle down to not only impact your view of the church, but also the view of Jesus?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think you start wondering what voices you can trust.
Yeah.
And I said it before, what should have been a people wound became a God wound, right? It wasn't God. It wasn't Jesus who was inconsistent. It was his people. And but I wasn't able to make that delineation. And so I would just think, well, who can I trust? Where are the voices that can give me a authentic picture? Because everywhere I look, I'm seeing, just an alignment and in a world where I don't hear voices crying in the wilderness that I can lean on. Now, it's not to say I did an exhaustive search, but I did. And I did search, and it just became easier to just throw my hands up and say, see, Jesus, you're messing up here.
You have your own personal struggle that you're working through, and you're on, for a lot of ways, the other side of that, still wrestling with it. how do we wrestle with the reconciliation of a church that seems disconnected with the message of Jesus right now? They want Jesus. They want to have him impact culture. They want the church to be a beacon of light to America and to the world. And yet somewhere along this line, the church maybe has sold out, maybe hasn't. And it is a broad question that categorizes everyone as the same, which is a very dangerous thing to do. What do you think our responses as church leaders, as people who are looking to Jesus, needs to be in this season where the church can set a real conversation, whether it's race, politics, whether it's homelessness, economic injustice, whether it's, we can go down the list forever and ever on the things that are the heartbeat of Jesus, but the church seems not to operate with. So as leaders in the church, as a person that impacts it through song and through a voice there, as a believer in a church that's on board of churches, as individuals listening, what can we be doing to reshape and restore not only our theology? You talk about you losing your religion, but finding your faith, finding Jesus. How can we do that same journey as a church?
Yeah, I think it is incredibly important for us to, to use an analogy, if you are building something and you realize in the process of building it that you've added some moldy wood, to that infrastructure, many people would say, well, let's just sweep the floor better, or let's just add some air freshener, or let's take allergy medicine. And the truth of the matter is we really do have to deconstruct that house and tear that wood out.
Yeah.
And then start rebuilding. And I think what's happened for much of the church in the West is that an institution has been constructed that is more about Western civilization than it is about a biblical truth and biblical realities. And so some of our ideologies that we have are not biblical ideologies, but they're cultural ideologies. And we're holding on to those. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we've got to learn how to deconstruct, let go of some of these cultural ideologies and say, hey, these are not mandates. These are not mandatory. So it's okay if we don't hang on to these particular things. A case in point is, I think, many of us will look around and specifically in America and will say, man, the church should be more diverse. But we never looked at how it became segregated, right? And if we don't look at how that actually happened, we can't tear that down. Instead, we just try to put everyone in the same building instead of looking at how that came to be and how can we reframe this and restructure this so that it does reflect the Bible instead of, these cultural norms that we see. So I say all that to say, I think it takes us looking at Jesus instead of trying to learn how to know what he knew. It's how do we become like he is. So it's more about being than it is about knowing.
Yeah, for a long time, I've been reconciling for myself. And I know when I pastored in California, this was the conversation we were having. We say these cultural terms, I'm a Christian, I go to church, I do all these things. And yet we can boil it down to, are you a follower of Jesus? Because if you follow who he was and what he does, you can measure that.
Yep.
So there is a question of accountability here. Mm-hmm. How do we keep ourselves accountable to Jesus? How do we keep each other accountable to the message of Jesus?
Yeah. Well, a large part of that is studying, studying his ways and his life. The disciples traveled with him for 3 years. They walked everywhere with him. They were, around him consistently. And so they were able to hear and see and understand different aspects of his life and how he walked. I think as it pertains to us, we've got to start with some cultural contextualization, understanding who he was. He was a practicing Jew, and yet he, was engaging in some things in ways that the Jews at the time were scratching their head at. And so I think it does us an injustice. It does him an injustice when we don't look at him in his own cultural context and understand what's happening at that particular time and how that can relate to our particular time and how he would navigate specific circumstances and situations that are very relatable to what we have going on as well.
Well, you are a Black man. I'm a white man. For us, culture, what you grew up knowing and what I grew up knowing was significantly different.
Yeah.
When I pastored in California, that was completely different than what I knew in Middle America, because I was working with addicts and with impoverished. We were in the worst of the worst in Northern California. So that was a cultural shift for me. And I think it's easy for us to have our presupposition, our worldview based on experience, and we void out the conversation with others. That's why I love having conversations with people who are radically different from my experience. I've never won a Grammy. That may surprise my listeners. It just hasn't happened. I keep calling the Academy. They keep on rejecting my calls. I guess you actually have to write music. I don't know. Anyway, all that to say, you have that experience. I don't. You grew up in a culture that's different than my culture. Yeah. I want to hear your story so that I can learn your cultural worldview so that I can then say, let's walk this journey together.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy for us to write off the experience of somebody else because we can't relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that race, George Floyd, the police officer's on trial right now. And I know that there's a lot of question of race because of injustice. Mm-hmm. How do we start having these conversations honestly? Yeah. How do we start saying, you may not understand, but let me help you?
Mm-hmm. Well, for anybody to learn, right? For anyone to learn, it takes a level of humility and obviously takes a level of empathy. And if you think you know already, you're not going to engage a topic or an area or an issue with humility, with the humility that it would take to learn.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's the beauty of the disciples, is that they were lifelong learners, that they had to, that culture at that particular time, it was all about learning. It was all about, how can I put myself under the authority of someone else so that I can become an authority on a particular area or a particular issue.
Yeah.
And I think we live in a very individualistic society. We live in a society where you can figure things out on your own. And there's not a great deal of saying, I need to learn from other people. And so what you'll have is individuals who, because of our class systems or our race systems, which are deep rooted, it's not like the stuff is surface level and you can just touch it. These are deep seated things that enable us to be able to learn.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking as a Black man, right? Mm-hmm. It's deep seated even in us. We've been so conditioned to believe narratives because of media, because of history, culture, that we don't even know some of these things until they're unearthed. Case in point is, I needed a plumber. And I looked on this task list of different plumbers, and at the top of the list was a guy. It said elite plumber. He had like 50 reviews. White, middle-aged guy, has an elite check next to him. In my mind, this guy knows what he's doing, and he's right. Underneath him is a Black woman, right? Not as many reviews, but all her reviews are 5 stars. It's the bias is so deep-seated even in me, mm-hmm. that I'm thinking I should choose this white man with a check next to him and not this Black woman. Yeah. Because socially, I've been conditioned to believe that a man is better than a woman at these particular jobs, that a white man is definitely going to be better than a Black woman. And until we can sit down and have conversations about these biases and beliefs and deep-seated things that we may not even realize, we're not going to learn much. And so I think we're just coming into these conversations being honest about a lot of these particular things.
Yeah. How can we better understand your culture? And what I mean by that is even deeper. You're talking about how along the way you even changed your own philosophy or were preconditioned for a specific belief. How can you realign with the culture that defines your background, your history, your generations of history, going back even before, an Americanization of your culture and your family and slavery and the downfall of all that? I know we're getting into messy areas here.
No.
But how can we, instead of trying to make everyone the same, really celebrate the differences and understand the value and beauty of that, I guess, is the question.
It's a great question. And, I think, Paul talks about this when he talks about how we are one body with many members.
Yeah.
And if you want to see yourself as a body, then you've got to believe that you need the members.
Yeah.
You've got to believe you need them.
Yeah.
Not just acknowledge them. Sure, there's some eyes over there. I need those eyes.
Yeah.
And if you need those eyes, then you'll spend the time being dependent and learning because I need them. So I'm dependent. I had a Bible study teacher, white guy from Virginia, who decides he wants to teach our Bible study at this predominantly Black group of college students. Mm-hmm. And so he needed us to be effective, right? He wouldn't have been effective in speaking our language or understanding some of our decision-making process if, he just went in there thinking he has everything he needs, right? And so what he began to do is he began to ask us, hey, what's your favorite movie? Can we watch it together? Hey, what songs did you grow up on? Give me a playlist of the songs you grew up on. Tell me about this and why do they say this and what is this? And he was learning about our cultural world, about our culture, so that he could be effective. He needed us. Mm-hmm. And so if I don't believe I need my Indian brothers and sisters, my Asian brothers and sisters, I'm not going to do much learning about them. I'm not going to do much learning about their perspectives or their world because they're expendable. And so once you need them, you begin to learn.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's a difference between a requirement of wanting and needing. There's a desperation in needing that says that this is critical, this is significant, there is importance on this. I want to do a lot of things in my life that never get done. Like I have some woodworking projects sitting over on the other side of my basement right now that I want to get done, but I don't need to get them done. And they will get done one day, but they're not a priority. And I think that by moving from, awareness to maybe even desire to a necessity that says, I'm called into this for a bigger purpose. Because if I understand your pain, if I understand your story, I can really walk the journey together. And I love that because I've never thought of it that way. The necessity of need in that story. I want to pivot a little bit here of something that you wrote in a book. And I thought this was really important. You talk about the script of your life, and you wrote, there was no script for how to rule, no script for how to lead, no script for royalty. This gave me hope because as a man, I don't necessarily have a script for how to exist in my world. I couldn't follow a script that came from the men around me or from my father, but over time, I have become convinced that God had a script for me to follow. His script is simple: to love him completely, to love my neighbors faithfully, and to navigate life in the light of these two commands. My responsibility is to love my wife and kids well and to remain faithful to them. That's what it means to be a father, even when I don't have a father. I love that passage for multiple reasons. One, you're leading out of a place that you're pioneering a new way. You didn't have the experience of father, and yet you father. And even in some of the documentary, you talk about how it used to be creative first, family second. And now it's family first, and you're striving to stay creative in that process, but that the perspective has changed. There are a lot of people who are struggling, whether it's COVID, whether it's economic reasons, whether it's the questions of culture and politics and the messiness of what's going on in America right now. They're questioning and they're saying, I don't have a script to know how to respond. How can they start to find that script like you found, to redefine the core of this is who I am, this is who I'm created to be, and this is how I live?
Yeah. Well, I think, Matthew 6 gives it to us in a simple way. Seek ye first the kingdom, and all these things shall be added unto you, right? Are we kingdom oriented? Because I think we can get preoccupied with all these empires around us, our empire, the empire of our nation, the empire of, finances, whatever it may be. And not realizing that there's a overall kingdom principle at play here. And one way you can look at it is imagine you have a bucket, just a small bucket, and, you got a handful of rocks, and you would say, hey, can these rocks fill up this bucket? And people say, for sure. I mean, sure, the rocks can fill up the bucket. So you put all the rocks in the bucket and they're almost to the top. And someone says, and you say, well, is it full? And they're like, yeah, sure. It's brimming full of rocks.
Yeah. But
if I get a handful of gravel and I put the gravel in there, now the gravel fits in there as well. And I say, is it full now? Well, no, it's not full yet, even though you think it is. Yeah. Because if I get a handful of sand, in there now, it's fuller. And I think what we get preoccupied with is the sand and the gravel.
Yeah.
Because if I put that sand in first and I put that gravel in first, I'm not going to have any room for the rocks. And so we're looking for this script and we're frustrated and we're like, oh, I got sand, I got gravel, all these little things going on. I'm not going to figure it out. And God is saying, start with the rocks. Mm-hmm. Start with the kingdom. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. Just start with the major areas and let him deal with the minutia. And so that's how I've had to live my life is, God, I don't know how to do finances. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this. Oh my gosh, what is, and God was like, hey, start with the rocks.
Yeah.
I'll help you navigate the rest.
Love that. I love the book. I think it's really, really a powerful book of transformation. And I think there's a lot of people searching right now for what is significant in the world. Their beliefs have been shaken by the last 2 years, for sure, with everything going on. And I encourage anyone listening, check out the book, check out what's going on. As we wrap up this segment, though, I'm going to bring up my favorite story in the book. And I want you to tell it. You talk about your experience with an Eastern Orthodox priest and how you're questioning, God, I don't know. I'm ready to check out of this journey. I'm going to go do something different because this ain't working. And you have this experience. Can you tell that story? Because I think it's a really fun story.
Yeah, I was I'm backstage at a concert I'd opened up for an artist named Jill Scott. And I'm backstage, and I prior to this show, I've been wrestling with God and just saying, God, I just don't know. Where are you? And are you real? And, I'm just tired of this Western evangelical culture. And I'm thinking like, maybe it's the Eastern Orthodox, like, is this what it is? Like, maybe this is it. And I was like, there's so many choices. I just don't even understand. I don't know, God. And I just pray like, Lord, just, help me.
Yeah.
And if you're real, help me. And, obviously he didn't have to do anything. He's like, I know I'm real, Lecrae. You need to know I'm real. But,
yeah.
But I'm backstage and my manager says, hey, this guy, he wants to meet with you. And I was like, this guy wants to meet me. He's like, yeah, he was in the music industry and then he's changed into like, doing some spiritual stuff now. And I was like, all right, so who is he? And he's like, I don't know. He's like a priest or something. And I was like, a priest? So the guy comes back to the dressing room, with a beer in his hand. And he's like, hey, how's it going, man? So I'm an Eastern Orthodox priest. And I'm like, you're what? And literally I just had this conversation with God. And then this guy's in my green room. And it was like, he's talking me through what it means to be Eastern Orthodox. And I'm just sitting there. I can't even pay attention to anything coming out of his mouth because I'm blown away that I just had this conversation with God, and sitting in my green room is an Eastern Orthodox priest. Like, what are the odds? I'm at a hip hop and R&B concert, and in my green room is an Eastern Orthodox priest drinking a beer. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So, obviously that wasn't a route I chose, but it helped me understand that God is bigger than the world that I've put him inside of.
Yeah.
So,
to me, it just reminds me how God always provides unique ways to speak to us. Yeah. When we feel like we're deaf to him, we can't hear anything he's saying, that he's not there, that he's just like, yeah, let me show you. Let me show you what I can do. And I just think that's a beautiful story. We're going to take a break right here. When we come back, we're going to do the rapid fire questions. We'll be right back. Do you want to hear more of Lecrae's story of rediscovering his faith? We are giving away one copy of his brand new book to one of our listeners. All you have to do to enter is head on over to jumblethink.com and sign up for our email newsletter. So what you waiting for? Head on over to jumblethink.com and sign up for our email newsletter to get a chance to win Lecrae's new book. Now let's jump into rapid fire questions.
Levez seulement le bras pour mettre l'aiguille sur le disque. Mettez le contact, reposez votre bras et attendez.
We're back with Lecrae. Are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Let's do it. I love it.
All right. Before we do that, though, it's going to be in the beginning of the episodes, but I want to remind people, how can they find this album? How can they find the book? How can they find, you just had a really, really cool project with Halvey. Is it Halvey?
Yeah, Halvey.
Yeah, you did a really great project with John Legend on Drown. You've got lots of stuff going on. You're collaborating all the time. How can people connect with you and get this book?
Yeah, you can get the book at Lecrae.com or any bookstore, that is available. Amazon, of course. The music is all available anywhere where you can download and stream music. So please go check it out. I'm Restored, the book, and Restoration, the album.
As a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a scientist. I didn't know that meant I needed to learn math, so that wasn't going to work. And then I wanted to be an actor.
Yeah. What is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
I say ask questions. Go find experts. Go find people who've done it and just ask them tons of questions.
What is one change you would like to see in the world?
Honest conversations, empathy, between all people.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I want my legacy to be that I laid my life down so that other people could, stand a little taller. If you're standing on my back, you're a little taller than you were the day before.
Where do you find inspiration? I
find inspiration in people who are making it through the most dire circumstances. And so when the first are last and the last are first, when the last are first, I'm inspired.
Yeah. What is one book you think every dreamer should read?
One book every dreamer should read. I mean, if you can stand it, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. If you got it's a dreamland, and it's somebody who's accomplishing something that they never would have imagined, and going on an adventure they weren't built for.
Yeah. Now you're hip, you're cool, you're in the know of what's going on around the world. What's one trend that gets you excited?
A trend that gets me excited. You know what it is? It's the creativity of social media, right? Oh. It's the comedy and the creativity. There's so many creatives out there who are sitting at home, you know, and they were hoping to get their own TV show or to become an actor, and they just get to like do it in their little space. And I love the fact that they get that opportunity and that exposure.
What's one habit that's helpful in your life?
Habit that's helpful in my life, I would say for me, it's exercise. Something that I have to do regularly. Gives me mental clarity. I do it first thing in the morning, so I accomplish something, and it just sets the trajectory for the rest of my day.
Yeah. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
I'd definitely be an entrepreneur in some kind of capacity, you know, starting something.
And our final rapid fire question is, what is one dream in your own life you still want to fulfill?
A dream in my own life I still want to fulfill. I want to travel the entire world. So I've always wanted to see the world. I've seen so many places. I still haven't been to India, Thailand, you know, Singapore, and like West Africa. So those are some places on my bucket list that I really would love to travel to.
As we wrap up, we always like to leave our guests have a final thought. What do you want to leave us with today?
Man, I guess I would just say ultimately that regardless of your circumstance, regardless of what you're dealing with, good or bad, God is consistent. He never breaks a promise. He's always faithful. He's always consistent. So hold him to his promises.
Love that. Lecrae, it has been an honor to have you on the show. Thanks so much for taking time out and joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Once again, I want to thank Lecrae for joining us here on Jumblethink. The links to his book and the documentary are in the episode notes, so go click those links and check out all he is doing. If you're new or a longtime listener of Jumblethink and you've never followed or subscribed to the Jumblethink podcast, do it right now. Head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts, search for Jumblethink, and click subscribe. To make it even easier, if you head on over to jumblethink.com, you'll find links to Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and about a billion other places. We make it easy. Head on over to jumblethink.com or go right to where you listen to podcasts and subscribe to the show. I also want to thank you for tuning in to today's show. It means the world to me that you would listen. And my hope, my desire is that these conversations would spark something inside of you to go chase those dreams and ideas inside of you. We believe you were created for something awesome, that your dreams and ideas matter, and that it's when you step out and into those things, you can see crazy cool things happen. Thanks again for tuning in. Now it's your turn to get out there, to dream big, to change the world around you.
Ôtez tout ce qui peut vous gêner ou tirer votre attention. Cherchez la meilleure position. Les bras et les jambes légèrement espacés. Étirez-vous doucement, mais complètement. En avant, en arrière, sur les côtés. Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.